You're listening to the Modern Saxophonist Podcast.
Welcome to the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. I'm your host, Mark MacArthur, and today is a very, very Western day because we get to talk to James Barrera. How you doing, James?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. And for all you saxophonists out there, you who may not know Dr. Barrera, he's in Long Beach State, where he teaches, Long Beach State University, and also Orange County School of the Arts, is it?
Yeah, that's right. The Orange County School of the Arts.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you've got you got to have the absolute toughest job in the entire saxophone world. I mean, how do you deal with living in Long Beach, California?
It's pretty nice. Yeah, we're really lucky out here.
A Bobby 72, huh?
Yeah. I think, well, we had a whole bunch of rain, and actually we had some flooding over here at the university. But, yeah, it was like record-setting rain.
Yeah, it was. We got a little bit of that here in Las Vegas, but you guys really got a lot, and you needed a lot, didn't you?
Yeah, well, they say now that half the state is out of the drought, but we're still under drought conditions in the south down here.
Well, when all that snow melt from Shasta comes down and all that, maybe everything will be.
Yeah, they say they'll probably be skiing. Who knows? Maybe until early June. So
man, that's crazy. And hey, sitting here in Las Vegas, folks, I got to tell you, it's one of the most beautiful sights in the world. Get to see this desert landscape, and then just to look up to the mountains, and this beautiful snow-capped mountains all the way across. This is absolutely it is such a beautiful sight. Hey, at this time, I know that sometimes you deal with smog down there in California. Are you able to see a lot of the mountains right now?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the day after it rains is super clear. You can see everything. You can see all the way to the mountains, and there's snow everywhere. So yeah, it's really crazy to be. You can see the ocean and the mountains and the snow and the city and all that. It's pretty crazy.
Man, that's awesome. I just my wife and I got to spend a little time down in Ramona, which is outside San Diego. But boy, we for the New Year, boy, that was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful time. California is just a great. That's such a hot spot. Where we ended up. I know we've met before, but where we ended up really just getting to know one another was when you were up here in Las Vegas here just a little while ago for the Las Vegas Saxophone Day,
right.
Put on by Lindsay O'Connor. You had some of your guys, and you conducted that massive.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Massive sax band. Yeah.
Yeah, there were two. It was a huge thing, and she had about 70 people in a grade 9 and under ensemble, and close to 80 in a 10 and over grade 10 and over ensemble. So that was really crazy.
Yeah. You picked some great literature. I enjoyed it, man. That was fun to hear. Fun to watch you. Fun to watch you wave the stick. You were great with the kids, and I think. As a Las Vegan, I just have to give you so much kudos for bringing your guys up and being involved and doing this. It's such it was so refreshing to see you there. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we wanted to support the event because it'd be great to have a regional thing every year or something that we could go to or bring artists out, because it's sometimes, even though there's a lot of people that live in Southern California, it's hard to get people together. Everyone's busy doing their own thing. They've got gigs. They've got this to do. So, it was when I saw that she was putting that on, and I knew it was going to be super organized. And
right.
So, I was like, yeah, let's go over there. So I talked to my students, and they said, hey, is this something we can do? And they were all for it. So we went over, and they had a great time. And they got to work with the Capital Quartet.
I ended up
that was great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially with Capital N, man. It was so good hearing those guys and just catching up with them, and just this last episode, because it's going to be released sequentially, but this last episode got to talk to Henning Schroeder, man, and I got to tell you that it's been a real pleasure to getting to know him and through all of that. So that there's a lot of fruit out of that Sax Day, I got to say, a lot of excitement.
Yeah, and those guys are super busy. They were out here for the Southern California School Band and Orchestra Association Conference and the NAMM show, which is a huge music industry thing. That's giant. I think there's over 100,000 people go to it, and it's pretty crazy. It's like a Southern California thing. Like everybody goes and see all your friends at NAMM.
I've not been to NAMM ever, and I've always really wanted to go. I don't know. Maybe sometime I'll get a booth, set up shop with the podcast, and just go at it for the whole day.
Yeah, there's so many people there. You always see someone. I'm trying to remember who we saw. I can't remember who are some of the people we saw, but I mean, well, Mindy Bear, ran into her real quick. That was kind of fun. She was there with her mom, and you just see people walking around, trying horns and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a couple videos. One of the guys was Paul Taylor, who lives here in town. Is a smooth jazz guy that was down there. So yeah, that show seems like you just get a mix of everything when it comes to music. It's not just, some shows, like I went up to Midwest, so that's clearly geared towards band directors. And, you go to a NASA conference and, well, clearly we know what that's all about. And, but you go to that, it seems like you just never know what to expect.
No, I mean, I tried, there was a didgeridoo I had to try, and, they have everything, all the electronic stuff. A former student of mine got a job for Roland, and she was demonstrating the Aerophone, which is sort of like a iwi kind of a thing, and that was pretty cool. It was nice to see her doing that, and then I got to try it, and that was fun. It was a very 80s retro thing. So, and they have a whole deal with a little mixer box you can hook up to your phone, and then you hook that thing up into that box, and then you can. It's like all controlled through your phone, and it's a little portable, one-man band deal. So that was pretty cool.
Now, I'd be interested in one of those, so we might have to talk afterwards. Or since we are going sequentially, you need to clue me in on that so I can talk with Dave Campbell on our next episode, because we're going to talk technology, folks. There's a little preview. But that Aerophone, or the new Roland iwi, I'd love to try that. I mean, I actually do use and play, use it to input, and when I'm doing some in the box writing and whatnot, I use my Akai 4000S wind controller, and but I find that the ergonomics of it, it's just one big long cylindrical, I wonder what that feels like. It seemed a little bit more spread out, a little more natural to the hands. Did you get to play it?
I mean, it's basically exactly like a saxophone. It has like a bis key, and it has side keys, and it has it's exactly the same layout, and it has like offset keys, like the offset G, and it's very fat. It's like wider. It's not like clarinet shaped. It's it's like wider. And it's pretty cool. It's you can obviously with the breath control, has like a little reed on it, and there's like a thumb. Like it does different things. It can do like a vibrato, or depending on the sound, it does like another little effect controlled with the thumb. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
All right, you might have just sold me on that.
I think it was. I think
I might have to.
$800 or something.
How much was it?
I think it was $800.
All right.
So I don't know. I don't know where that sits in the price range of electronic saxophones.
Well, that's pretty similar to the Akai.
Okay.
Actually, that's pretty solid. So, well, I was. That's what would get me. I think actually I would have to promise my wife that I'd have to leave my credit cards at home.
Yeah, definitely.
I just don't think my I don't know if I have that much self-control.
Yeah, I mean, this year's NAMM, I think last year there was a little bit more interesting things. There was the Chromatic tenor saxophone was one thing that they had. I think that's, I want to say J.L. Smith, but I could be wrong. But it was at the Music Medic booth, but I don't think they were there this year. But that's it's a saxophone with a completely alternate fingering system that eliminates cross fingerings, and it's really crazy. I can't even describe it. It has toggle keys. Like you there's a key and you push it and you kind of swing it down and it operates another pad, and you push it up and it does another pad, and it has a thumb. It has buttons for both thumbs.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really interesting. So that was there last year, but I didn't have my tenor mouthpiece, so I wasn't able to try it. But I was hoping it was going to be this year, but he wasn't there, so I was kind of sad.
Oh, man. Well, that's one thing I love about the saxophone is that somebody always tries to come up with an improvement that does something like that.
Yeah.
And it definitely provokes that. I having learned the fingerings for, say, the Iwi or something like that, and it's similar, but it's not. And certain things, I don't know. I wonder. It would have to be its own thing. I mean, does it really? When you held it, did it feel like it was actually logical?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, he's got it. I mean, his plan. I don't know if they're going to actually do this or not, but he wanted to actually make more of like a student line of these, so that younger kids could just start playing it, because he realizes that people that already know how to play saxophone aren't probably going to learn a whole new fingering system. So he was kind of thinking more, like a student thing. Young kids would learn it this way, which makes sense. But I don't know. Who knows? It's just kind of like an interesting thing when you see it.
I wish him all the luck in the world on that. I do. I think I think I know this. I know band directors, and I know that's going to be a little bit of a tough sell.
Right.
But certainly not to poo-poo it, because I got to tell you, if it's very logical, who knows? There's definitely a place for that in the world. Well, I know this, that we had talked prior to that we wanted to since this is your base of knowledge, I wanted to talk and let you share about something that was turned on to me a while ago in our episode that was done with Sal Lozano and talking is the Lindemann Method. And I mean I know this has been around for years, but as far as my awareness, last year when I interviewed Sal, that was my first time ever really hearing about it. I mean, I have to admit, growing up, I was the Larry Teal book was basically my Bible,
right? And
so I'm really excited to hear a little bit about this. So I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm just going to give you the floor, James, and let us know.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Lindemann Method. It's a book written in the 30s by a man named Henry Lindeman, and I came to it when I was in high school, and the person that I was taking lessons with was a student at Long Beach State, and she just gave it to me, just said, "Oh, here's this book that I'm using in college," and so I've been using it since I was a kid. I didn't know it was like a whole thing, but then I ended up going to Long Beach State, and I learned from my teacher, Leo Potts, who in turn was a student of a man named Phil Sobel. So Phil Sobel is the one who was a student of Lindemann. And when Phil was a kid, I believe he was in New Jersey. There's this whole story, one of those stories your teacher tells you and you've heard it dozens of times. But basically, Phil was sort of out to seek his fortune in New York and was bringing a saxophone and was going to take some lessons with this guy. And someone on the train saw him and said, "Hey, what are you doing, kid? And gonna go take some lessons." And he said who he's gonna go study with, and he said, No. Don't bother with that guy. You need to go see Henry Lindeman. He's the one everyone's studying with, and that's what you should do. So that's what Phil did. He went and took this guy's advice and sought out Lindeman, and who was apparently a very well-known teacher. And he wrote articles in magazines. There's a former student of mine, Yi Chen. He's doing his doctorate at University of Iowa, and he's doing his dissertation on Henry Lindeman. And he dug up all these articles that he wrote on microfilm, and it's really interesting how many articles. I didn't even realize that he was published in other magazines of the time. I thought he had just written this book, but he was actually fairly well known in New York City. So anyway, Phil studies with Lindeman, learns the Lindeman studies, and moved away from New York to Southern California to L.A. And Phil played in all the studio bands of the in the 60s and the 70s. Like I remember, I think he played on all those variety shows that were in Hollywood, like the CBS orchestra and NBC orchestra, sort of things. Right. And I know he did Streets of San Francisco and that era of TV. He was playing in that. So a lot of guys in the area studied with him. So there's many studio guys in Southern California who studied with Phil because, again, just like Lindeman, he was sort of like the guy that you went to if you wanted to work on your tone, you wanted to work on your technique, because he approached things sort of from a working musician's point of view, sort of a non-academic. He didn't teach at a university. He had his own studio, and so a lot of studio guys, they're not necessarily university people. I mean, I think my teacher, Leo, he was a student at Long Beach State. I'm trying to remember when he started. I want to say it was the late 60s, early 70s. But he was the first saxophone major at Cal State Long Beach because it was not allowable to be a saxophone major, and he had to play the bassoon at first. So there really weren't a lot of college-educated saxophonists in the area.
Right there, that time period that you're talking about right there, that really was the definition of an awful lot. The wealth of universities that have access to saxophone majors and teachers at those universities now is significant in comparison to what was happening back in that time period, which of course was the years where I was born. So that's nice. So
right. So Leo. So now we'll move on to Leo. So Leo Potts went to Cal State Long Beach, and when he graduated, he actually went and studied. He actually got a Fulbright scholarship, and he went to Paris and was an auditor in the Marcel Mule class at the Paris Conservatory. So he went over there and spent a year in France, and I believe he took lessons with Daniel Defaye, and so he did that for a year, and he came back. And he was here trying to make his way and doing gigs, and he ran across Phil, and people said it's a similar thing. You should go study with this guy, and he's like the guy in town. And so Phil, according to Leo, sort of overhauled his playing. I really showed him this new method a new method to him of how to play and the various relationships between finger and air, and that's what the whole Lindemann's all about. It's kind of a different idea of than what people usually talk about, but and then he passed that on to us, and so it goes. So the whole moral story is this random guy that was on the train that told Phil to go check out Lindemann, and I think but for that interaction, I don't think we would be, this book would have been sort of lost to the ages because it fell out of print, and pretty much it was just people that had a copy, and Leo gave us this copy, and I believe the copy you have, I actually made when I was at Indiana University. I found an original Lindemann studies, and it had like 12 more pages of all that text that you wrote. The one I had didn't have any of that text. So, yeah,
gotcha.
So there's like one original Lindemann studies that I was able to find.
Oh my gosh!
I scanned the whole thing, and it's got all these cool drawings and more text and explanation, and that's really interesting. Kind of his point of view, and I mean, the book, when you talk about art of saxophone playing, that book is from the 1960s, and this is another. I mean, you look at, I guess, other contemporary books would be, I believe it's called Foundation to Saxophone Playing by Ben Varikin. It's pretty much what the Universal Method is. The Universal Method is 2 books glued together, and one of them is Foundation to Saxophone Playing, which is from the 30s, which is really just a collection of exercises. It doesn't have explanation about how to play the saxophone. It's just kind of, whole notes and scales and stuff. But the Lindemann is different because he goes into how you do things and how you should hold the saxophone and how you should breathe and what you should be trying to do. And just like a modern thing, like you would expect to hear from anybody, like this is how you do it. And it just like, I kind of feel like in the old days, they just hand you saxophone and just figure it out. That wasn't really like a method to doing it.
Well, the pedagogy certainly has developed, and that's what I was interested in, is seeing, because I too had the Universal Method when I was growing up, and I remember it just didn't have that much information, exactly as you were talking about, but certainly a lot of exercises. I've done a ton of those exercises as I studied in high school, and I used that just as my way to do fingerings and of course I studied with a clarinet teacher. That's who was actually teaching around my area. So I did but when it came down to the saxophone, what do? He actually did know enough to say, hey, here's the Larry Teal book. And I read it like as many times as I could just to know what I'm doing. And so, but to see this come out and of course, my peak interest in talking to you is the fact that I did read through all that text, like you were talking about, that was in there,
right?
And so it's just amazing how great the information is. I do think it does bear not only reading but also hearing it from somebody and how to implement it a little bit into your own playing, especially this air to finger that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So I think. Probably the most unique thing in this book is this chapter about fingerings, the fingers. And basically he says, few players appreciate the relationship between the fingers and the tone. The correct use of fingering is not only an aid in acquiring good technique, but your phrasing and subsequently your tone depend entirely upon it. So I think, because I sort of feel like I had 2 educations. I had my education with Leo, and then I studied with Dr. Murphy, and so I got the Midwest, whole saxophone thing. So I think that was something that I didn't hear a lot of, that your fingers, like how your fingers, like basically, if you were talking to Phil or Leo and they see you play and your fingers are really flying all over the place and the fingers are lifting up, I think some people would say, well, that's going to hurt you because you won't be able to play very fast, or you'll be making errors. But they're saying, like, no, that's why you're so sharp. That's why your low note didn't speak, is because you have all this tension and you're flinging your hands away. And that when you have tension in one part of your body, you have tension in all parts of your body. You can't clench a fist and not feel that in your throat and in your mouth. It's hard to be relaxed if your hands are, kind of hammering away, and sometimes you hear people say your hands should be machine-like, or they should, really be hitting the keys, and those are things that Leo really tried to discourage. That you should that your hand, that you should think about the violin bow, and that's one of the little drawings he has, like a violinist, and they have a very smooth motion in their bow, and that you can have a smooth motion in your finger, and that will help you to phrase better. And like Lindemann's, I know, but there's this cool drawing. He's got these little fingers, and they're on like a hinge, and he's got like the incorrect one, and the fingers like basically pointed up all the way in the air, and the one has a nice curve. But yeah, so he goes on to say, it is impossible to keep the tone flowing while the fingers are forcibly moved from one key to the other. The slightest effort in either raising or lowering the finger can be detected in the tone. I often prove this to pupils by having them blow in the instrument while I finger it to illustrate that I can vary their tone by altering my fingering. The feel and synchronization of the fingers actually sing and phrase for you. The least obstruction of the fingers will prevent you from producing the phrase or sound you intend to have come out. So, it seems crazy that how you finger would change your tone, but I believe it has two effects. One is what I call like a real effect and an imagined effect. So the real effect would be when you're really hammering away. I mean, if you just finger on your saxophone very hardly, and you can hear those percussive sounds going through the tube. You can hear that clank, 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 clank.
Yeah.
Clank. And I mean, if you're hammering away, those little pulses are going into your saxophone tube, and you're going to hear those in your tone. You won't be able to play smoothly. You've got that little tiny disruption of air going into the tube, and it really smushes your pad. Depending on how thick your pad is, it can kind of, if you ever just play and squeeze harder and relax and squeeze harder, you'll hear a small difference in the sound. You hear a little, there'll be a small difference if you really squeeze hard and you relax your hand. You really squeeze hard and you relax your hand. So there is something happening. Now that might be because your saxophone's not sealing very well. It could be for various reasons, but it does have an effect. The harder you press or you really relax, it does do a difference. Now, whether you think you can perceive that difference, I leave that up to other people, but it does do something. It does something. Now, the imagined effect is when you're just hammering away and you're trying to play a beautiful phrase. Those are contrary things. Imagine a conductor, and he's like, he's really got these aggressive motions, and you're trying to play this lyrical thing. I mean, they don't go together. So people who encourage this their fingers are flying and they're just really hitting with a lot of pressure on the keys. I mean, I've seen people and their keys are bent. I mean, they bend the side keys in. They're stuck because they hit so hard. They bend the metal over time as they're really pushing, and that's not going to help you to play with beauty and lyricism if you're really just hammering away on those keys. It does do something. I mean, to say it does nothing would be inaccurate. It does something, whether it's a huge effect or a modest effect. It's definitely there, and it's something that what I found is that I am more happy as a player because I try and play with relaxation, and I can play for longer. I mean, you see, like when I was in college, I would see people and they had carpal tunnel, they're wearing braces, they've got all this crazy stuff, and I'm like, why? I mean, that's crazy. And they're using so much. I mean, imagine that they're using so much tension in their body that they're injuring themselves, and that's affecting how you play. It's affecting how you sound, and that's really, part of what this whole Lindemann method is. He goes on. I read the whole book, but he goes on and talks about how you should relax your hand, and your hand should be lying as if it's totally limp on the keys, and that's really what it's all about. It's almost like. I have a colleague here who does body mapping, and it's about looking at how your body interfaces with the instrument. And when I read the Lindemann, I'm like, well, that's kind of what he's talking about. He's sort of looking analytically at like how you should interface with your instrument in the most comfortable way, and so it's very ahead of its time. I don't think he was intending to do that, but that's how it comes across to me looking at it today in 2017, which is crazy to think about.
That is
Almost
crazy
like
to think about. My gosh, I just listening to you talk. I'm just sitting. That's when I looked at the trigger, and I saw the curled fingers on the picture. And I was sitting there. I'm just thinking about all the ways that I teach saxophone, because it really bothers me too. When I look at a student that's tension, I've had a student, former student of mine, who had to have carpal tunnel surgery on both hands. She did playing Barry sax, and she's all stretched out. And when she was playing, I was like, oh my gosh, look at all that tension. What are you doing? Why are you playing with so much tension? And I anything that helps us with longevity of playing, because I'm going to tell you, getting older, man, this isn't getting any easier. And in college, here's something that ended up. It was funny. It worked out right at the same time where Kellen Thomas was having me work on close technique. I was one of those that gripped. I had all the, I was working out and I was like, overbearing on the saxophone and just doing whatever I could to, I don't know, wring its neck. And I went in, and I would go out to, with my friends. One of our things to do was to go rock climb. And so I would rock climb there was a season where I would rock climb so much. It was practice, playing ensembles, do my classes, practice, and then go rock climb. And so what happened is my fingers got locked into this like C position, oh, wow. Like where it was like really close, and I couldn't really extend my fingers too far, and it curled in from the from your tip of your finger, your second knuckle, in, and it's like. It's just a reaction from having to grip so much on the wall. Well, what happened is when I put that on the saxophone, I realized I had pretty good. My fingers fit right on the keys, and then what was amazing is I could pull the finger into the palm of my hand, and then I noticed, because it was emphasized, I had a natural spring back if I just relaxed the finger. And so when I saw the method, I completely connect with the musical aspects of this. I'm not condoning everybody go out and rock climb to get better technique. And I'm sure there were, I got to tell you, from all that rock climbing, I still have a pretty hefty grip as a result. It's amazing what muscles that works on. But I do know this, that when I look at my students and they are using a technique that's way too high, and I've got a couple now that are doing it, and it's just that training method. So James, do you have anything in connection with that you have to help your students to limit that movement, other than maybe watching in a mirror or just being aware of it?
Well, the first thing we do is these finger exercises, and it's funny because I did these at IU too. Dr. Murphy calls them digital exercises, but basically you just train yourself to move one finger at a time. And in the Lindemann studies, he's got this page called fingering, and they are 2-note pairs. So the first one is A to B, and when I was going to school and I was looking into the Londeck's exercise mécanique books, and in volume 1 is basically the same thing as what is in the Lindemann, where he's got all these 2-note pairs. And so I realized there was definitely something to this idea that you should practice one finger at a time. Now the difference is that in the Lindemann, he does G to G sharp. So that's what I always start with, is I start them with just laying the hand nice and relaxed on the instrument, and they just finger a G sharp, because that's going to be your default finger. Because even if you finger a G first, you can get that pinky up in the air, and you're already kind of on the road to all the fingers flying away. So when you play G sharp, I feel, even though it's a weird note to play, ergonomically, it's your best note because you're most likely to place your hand in the correct spot because you have all 4 fingers down. And if you think about it in terms of where you're at on the saxophone, instead of what note you're playing, things start to look different. You realize that the notes that you play with your 4 fingers are G sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. Those are the 4 notes that you would play, and that would just be moving 1 finger at a time. And that's usually what I'll have people practice, is my fingering exercise is a little different from the Lindemann. I've kind of taken the Lindemann, and put my own spin on it. And so, I'll have them do G to G sharp is very slowly, and then G to A, and A to B, and B to C sharp. And they just work on that, just really working on, I always tell them to push and stop pushing, push and stop, because the key is to eliminate lifting. You don't want to lift your hand up in the air where you're lifting up. Your finger will go up all by itself. The spring will push it up. You don't have to do anything. And I always show them, I'll say, look, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to play a note. You hit my finger and just hit it. Just go as fast as you want. And it moves up and down, and they're playing whatever notes they want. And I'm saying, now look, what were you doing? You were pushing on my finger. Did you lift up on my fingers? No, why did they go up? Because that's where they want to be. The only reason your fingers fly up in the air is because you pull them away and make them go up in the air. They'll stay right on those pearls if you do nothing. So a lot of what is in the Lindemann is about the absence of effort. It's not that you have to, like sometimes I'll see people and they'll say I know you want to keep your hands on the keys, and when I look at them, their hands are like rock hard and they're sort of hovering. I say, you're just hovering over the keys. Like, your hand is super tense, actually. Like, you hit their hand, and it's hard. I'm like, That seems really difficult. Like, you're working harder than I am. We're doing the same thing. Our hands are not pushing on the key, but I'm doing nothing. It's like I'm asleep, and you're like your hand's practically shaking. It's so stiff from, trying to not put your, lift your fingers up. And that's what that tension is. And it's not a coincidence. Usually people that play that way have a very tense sound. You couldn't say it's a very relaxed, easygoing tone. It's kind of tense. It has this, tightness in it. And as they relax their hands, then they can relax their shoulders, and they can relax their throat, and they can relax their embouchure. And then, the tone is more warm and inviting. Instead of being sort of, that tense sound. I think some people don't understand, why do I sound so tight? I sound so tight, and I do long tones, and then it's like, how you do the long tone? They're sitting there, on a long tone, and their hands super, just pushing so hard on the keys. Right. One way to tell if you're pressing too hard is, and this is actually in the Lindemann, is to play a B, and as you're holding the B, move your finger up and down on that pearl. And if you can't move your finger, if your finger is locked and you can't actually budge it because it's so tight, you're pushing way too hard. If you're like this and you're pushing on that pearl and you try and move your finger and it's stuck, that's too hard. If you release the grip and you can slide your finger up and down that B pearl, that's really the proper pressure. I mean, that's the minimal pressure with still keeping the pad down. And now if your saxophone leaks, then you need to get your saxophone. A lot of people overpressure because their horn's leaking.
Yeah, and this is where I've gone to my repairman, and I'll go to play test my horn, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you have such a light touch. Why are you? We got to completely readjust your horn." I'm like, "Well, why didn't you readjust for that earlier?" That's the way in a lot of ways, that's the way we're supposed to play, is a light touch. It closes, and I don't want to have to work intensely hard for my fingers to get down and be able to do. It's not even about fast technique. It's just like, I'd love to be able to count on the fact that I'm lyrically moving from a G to an A, and I would like, when I lift my ring finger, that it just goes. And then when I put it back down, the note just changes, and it's beautiful when it changes. That's the expectation. So for those out there that are looking into this is where you might want to sit with your repairman and you might actually want to sit there and with your hands on your keys to let them know how light you'd like to touch the keys, because I think if you've got some leaks, that's where there are adjustments. They may be used to somebody else who does grip too hard.
Right. Well, I think the ultimate way, as far as a saxophone tech, is to gravity fit, where they mount your saxophone on a brace and then detension it, and then the pads should just seat with just gravity. They should just hit, and that's how they check for leaks. That's the ultimate way. If it seals with gravity, that's it, because there's no pressure. There's zero. That's really how it should be done. It should be gravity fit. It just falls on. A real repair tech will know that. I mean, if they're using their hand, it's because they don't have a bench clamp, or they're just doing it quick. And they should have a mount, and it should be mounted sideways. Take the spring tension off, it hits it, and then that's a whole other level.
Okay, I'm going to have to admit, and I know there's a few listeners out there. Admit it. You, just like I've heard this gravity fit, and for some reason, it didn't make sense. That makes perfect sense. Thanks for explaining it that way. That's just like for me, I'm just going, okay, now I'm going to look for that. Perfect.
Yeah, because otherwise you don't know how hard they're pressing, and if you have thick pads, or and if you'd use like black roux pads or a very hard pad, that's what you have to do, because they're very thin and hard, and they need to be seated exactly perfectly. And you want to go the next level, you need to have your tone holes leveled, because most people's tone holes are not level. They will have a dip in them, and they need to be leveled also. And sometimes, like I had a student had like a glob of lacquer on his tone hole. So sometimes there's stuff. It is possible for your tone hole to not be level, and that needs to be adjusted. And so if you find that you're pressing super hard, and then you try and relax your grip, and it doesn't work anymore, you should probably, who knows, you might need new pads, because if your tone holes are very off, if they, for whatever reason, I've seen horns, because I've done repair a little bit, and I've looked at people's tone holes. Basically, you take the whole horn apart, and you get a metal disc, and you put it on top of the tone hole, and then you see, and sometimes you will be surprised at how much light goes through. And if your tone hole was very uneven, and you're pressing really hard, then the pad you're using has conformed to that fit. And then as you relax your hand, then it's going to have a leak. So it may be the whole thing needs to be redone in order for you to relax that grip. It's possible. Hopefully not. But, usually the tolerances are, okay. I've been told when they assemble a saxophone, it's done very quickly. They have to pump out a lot of saxophones. So even a high quality saxophone, they've only spent an hour or so putting it together. So when you take it to a professional saxophone tech, they could spend all day doing that, or many days, messing with your horn, really checking everything's perfect. So, I always tell my students that what I'm telling them is contingent on their saxophone working. Your saxophone doesn't work, and you're trying to relax your hand, yeah, sure, I would imagine probably notes won't come out. That's why you're pressing so hard. You're making up for your broken saxophone.
Right. Yeah, and then that's not even to count that if you're using a school horn like a Barry sax or a tenor sax that you don't have access to owning one at this point, and you're using that horn and you're just trusting what that has. And so wow, lots of good things to think about. So James, is there any now you said with air, is there anything with the air that Lindemann has that's that's unique that you can share?
Yeah, sure. So the air concept would be that you want to think about your notes. Like I think probably middle D is probably the best example. Okay, where you have people see on the page, they see B, they see C, they see D. D is higher than C. But what you need to understand is think in terms of tube length on the saxophone, where you're going from a very short tube, C, to basically all the tube in a D, and that a middle D is the same tube length as a low D. So, a lot of times people always think that middle D is super sharp, that it's crazy sharp. In my experience, it should be about 10 or 12 cents sharp. But I think a lot of people are playing it 20, 30 cents sharp. I mean, we know it is built sharp to a certain extent, but not to the extent that most people play it. And the reason for that is because they're not playing the right tube length. And this is sort of what, I think a real typical thing, you see people, they play a high note, and then they think they have to drop their jaw to play the low note. And the reason that they think that is because they went up for the note. They kind of gripped and they went up for the note, and it creates this illusion that they have to drop their jaw to play the lower note, when they should have been at the lower note the whole time. They should have been playing that upper note just like the lower note, and then they wouldn't have had to go anywhere. They're already at that lower level in terms of resistance. And that's what a lot of what Lindemann talks about, is knowing the resistances of every note on your horn so your airspeed is prepared to play those notes. We talk a lot about blowing down the tube, thinking about, when you see a lower note that you're trying to get your air to be prepared, prepped to play. Some good examples, if you ever work on the Bach cello suites, there's a lot of octave drops. There'll be like a scale that goes up, and it's a middle B, and then your next note is a low C. And that seems very difficult to do until you realize that your airstream has to be prepped for that low note the entire time that you're playing. And just really knowing where your air is supposed to go and being ready for that. So when your finger, and this is where the fingers come down, this is the whole finger to air, you're sort of I'm thinking about my pinky, it's down there. I'm not looking at the page, I'm thinking about the finger, and I'm coordinating my fingers with the airstream. Like one of the things that Leo tried to have us do is to never have a finger down before we play. And that's sort of something to try and train yourself to always think about how the air and the fingers meet, and that the fingers are the trigger for your tone. Like imagine if you're on the piano and you push the key and the note comes out. A lot of people, when they play a note on the saxophone, they push the note down first. They push their fingers down first. Then they blow at this closed finger, and there's squeaks or weird things happening. You think what's the typical thing? You've got like a low note, put the fingers down, and then you blow at it, and it's like, it's got like an unpleasant sound. You can try, no fingers down, and then everything's coordinated, led by the fingers, and you breathe, and then those fingers go down, and just magically the note will just come out. Just it works so well. People they don't know what to think, because they didn't realize that thinking about focusing on that coordination of the fingers makes everything else fall into place, as far as your breath and where your tongue goes on the reed and all that, chain of events that has to occur for that low note to come out. Starting with your fingers already down can, it's like you're blowing at this closed tube, and it's much more difficult to do than blowing at an open tube. Like sometimes people do the finger pop. If you've ever heard of that, you have to play like a low note, and then you lift, say like if you're playing a low B flat, you can lift your F finger and you pop it down when, basically the same thing. It's you're trying to use your finger as a coordinating tool. So you breathe, and then it's like everything's coordinated, and the note speaks a lot better versus just blowing at that closed tube. Just seems like it doesn't work as well as really training yourself to play and with the fingers open, and then everything happens all together. The note goes down, the air comes, the note speaks really great. And if you look at a lot of music, that's what we're doing when we're playing. You're playing a phrase, there's a rest, there's another note that's higher or lower, you release, and then you finger as you play the note. You don't usually, I try and discourage people from fingering in the rest, then they blow at that closed finger. They should finger together just like you would on the piano. You kind of, all your thoughts, and it helps you play better rhythm too. Because, if you're putting this hand down, your hand is the one playing the rhythm, and if your hand is playing this rhythm during a rest or something, it can be, it's kind of like like there's two brains working at you. It's like one brain moving your hands just kind of at random times. in another brain trying to do the rhythms instead of just like a unified thing. Yay, dog.
So we are taking just a minor pause to witness the you guys can't see, but the absolute cuteness of my dog. He's broken into my office. He willed his way through the door to say hi to Daddy. So
But a good example in the saxophone rep is the I think it's the Larson Concerto, where it has these octave triplets. I think it's a D, and that's really difficult. And the key to doing that is understanding that your air and your embouchure and all that is at that low D, that you just let the octave key do all the work for you, and just really trying to not lip it up or lip it down, just staying the same, letting the octave key do the work. A lot of people that I run across are under the impression that the octave key helps you to get the high notes to come out, like it's an assistant, and really it does everything. It's doing everything, and so you really, playing the notes in the low register, that should be how you're trying to play everything. And a lot of the exercises in the Lindemann involve crossing over that C to D break. And what I'll have people do, I with like a lot of stuff, is I have them play without the octave key. I said, just play not an octave lower, but just don't press the octave key. If you see a middle D, just don't do anything. It's going to be a low D. You see a middle E, you see a high C, now it's a middle C. And if you play your piece without the octave key, usually what happens is the notes are still up in octave. They come out up the octave anyway. I'm like, well, why do you think you're sharp on that A? I mean, you're squeezing it up. So that's a no brainer why you're sharp up there. And if they still can't do it, sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually tape over their octave holes and have them still press the key anyway, because sometimes pressing the key triggers that grip on the to do their high note face. Right. So if you tape over the holes, then they sort of understand there should be no high notes now. And when they press the key, it just kind of untrains themselves just to keep everything down. Now, I know there's probably people like saying, well, you want to voice every note. So, I'm on board with the whole voicing concept, and I use it a lot. But I think the truth is you don't have to voice as much as you think. And really, the vast majority of notes do not need to be voiced at all. And you could just play almost every note on the horn normally, and you're good to go.
As somebody who I would actually say that the voicing might have been considered the primary form of working on some of the notes. And yes, I've come to that conclusion as well. I had a great time having Steve Jordheim out one time, and we worked on these little octave exercises called he called them octave flicks, and just getting the place where the octave key just works no matter what. You just blow straight through the center, you relax the voicing, and just let it work. And I just was like, wow. And I noticed for myself and for everybody involved, there were maybe some color differences, and what I liked about it was there's a fluidity that happened throughout some octave transfers or even a fifths and whatever else. And you're even, for me right now, I'm just absolutely loving how I am going to steal so much of what you just said to help out my students. And I know they're going to listen, but I'm definitely stealing some of these exercises because my it's amazing. It's amazing how much we want to control the saxophone. And even if you're using voicing or not using voicing, like you said, like they're just playing sharp on the upper range. Well, it's just because they're trying to play so high, like what you're saying. And it's funny. I love what you were saying to just tape over, because it stops them from even having the opportunity to go up, and get them to really just just focus on where they're at in the horn, like for the fingerings. It's just gonna, the octave key is gonna work the way that the octave key is gonna work, and then and you get that transfer. But like that right there. It leads it all the way back to what you're saying about the fingerings, to where it's the relaxation. It's getting that ease of play. And what I really like, and just what you were saying about just for me tying it all together, is that that taking that relaxed approach where everything's easy and it just works. Like the saxophone should just work as you blow through the tube. It should just work. And I think overworking and over squeezing and over. I'm not only going to check my students, I'm going to check myself just to double check a few things, see if there's anything else I can work on and tweak. But I know this. I know this. Everything that you've said so far is applicable. I think anybody could go try these exercises, 2-note exercises, working back and forth, just moving one finger at a time.
I mean, and
this is
like
beautiful.
Leo, right now he's sort of, he's doing his thing. He calls it the Lindemann Potts approach to wind playing, and he applies it to just all winds. He doesn't even see it as a saxophone thing anymore. Could be whatever, he says he has students that play the trombone, they play French horn, and just thinking about relaxing and letting the air just flow through your throat without obstruction, and just relaxing your shoulders, and that it benefits everybody. And I mean, it's definitely a whole thing. Once you learn more, you start to realize how it all ties together. It ties into how you play rhythm, and how you play bar lines, and how you play different meters, and note lengths, how you create accents, because it all comes back to the hands. We play rhythm with the hand. You should be tonguing to your hand. You think about someone when they tongue a rapid passage and it's not coordinated, and people think, oh, I need to work on my tonguing. And then all of a sudden, well, didn't you try that phrase slurred? And when they do it slurred, the rhythm's not very good. And I say, well, I mean, if the rhythm in your hand is not good, there's no way that your tongue is going to make those mistakes with your finger. So you should really focus on getting the hand to play a nice even rhythm first, and then you can start to tongue to those fingers, and then the passage will be more coordinated instead of the other way around. Usually people hear a passage that's tongued incorrectly. They think it has something to do with their tongue. It might. But more than likely, it's your hand is not probably playing the best phrase possible, and if you're not, doing that first, then tonguing to a uneven rhythm is impossible to do. I mean, you can't do it. Your tongue is just not going to make mistakes with your fingers. Your fingers have to be playing great rhythm, musical rhythm first, and then you can start to tongue to that. So it just everything always comes back to the fingers. Are you fingering it in a good way, or is you kind of hammering it away? Your hand was kind of doing something funky. I mean, I see people doing all kinds of crazy stuff with their hands. They've got their thumb in a weird spot. They're hooking their pinky under their C key. So those are, I guess the difference is I always address those things first. Like, first thing, you need to learn how to hold your horn properly. You need to relax your hand, because we can't proceed. I can't proceed because everything else is always going to come back to that. It's always going to be like, well, I mean, yeah, your hand's like all crazy. And, then they're playing rhythms that are wrong. I'm like, yeah, well, it's impossible for you to play the rhythm right because your hand's all crazy. Your hand's doing all this nutty stuff. You don't have the fine muscle control to play rhythms. So, I don't know, like turning the metronome on louder is not going to help you.
Right. Okay. My students, I hope you're listening. And I hope any students out there, I hope you're really paying attention right now, because I think we all could use a review. And what a great time. This is so much detail. James, You really, I love how you're talking, and I love your teaching style, man. Your students have got to just absolutely just eat this up, because I'm eating it up, man. I got to tell you, man, I want to come down to LA and get a lesson with you, man, because I'm feeling a little motivated right now. So hey, what I'd like to do right now is, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'd like to give you where can people reach you, and maybe even find the Lindemann Method to check it out for themselves, and anything else.
Yeah, definitely. The best place is just on the CSULB website. I haven't updated my website in forever, so I kind of gave up on it. But I just use the CSULB one. It's fine. Has all the same information, bio, nice picture with all my saxophones. And if you wanted to email me, you can use my csulb.edu. Email's great. And the Lindemann studies, I threw it up on a website called Lulu, LULU.com. And I believe if you just search Henry Lindeman on there, it will come up. And there's a copy floating around, PDF copy, which I believe was my scan of it that somebody got. I don't know, but that's fine too. And basically my motivation for doing the Lulu. I don't really make any money off of it. It was just because I would have students walk in with this giant pile of sheets of paper, and I got sick of it. And so you'll get a nice printed bound copy. Looks very nice, very fancy. And so you can actually buy one there, and there's an ebook version. But I do believe if you Google around, you will just find one online. People have put it up, but I will take the credit for that scan.
Well, I will tell you, folks, as we need to in the saxophone universe, is of course to support. So let's go ahead to Lulu and order it, because if you really got something out of this episode, I think it's also good to give back. I got to say that's a pretty good philosophy. If we keep doing that, the blood flow keeps going, and we got to feed the machine, feed what we do, because I got to tell you, it's a passion, and as we support each other, it'll continue to work better. And so, yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and everything. I'm just going to say this. This is the Modern Saxophonist Podcast, and you can find us at www.modernsaxophonist.com. And also you can email me, themodernsaxophonist@gmail.com, and find us on Twitter @themodernsax. And one of the things I really like to direct every single one of our listeners to is I want to do a big push to our Facebook page. What happens is we actually have a player connected to that you can actually listen to the podcast off of Facebook. And I'd like you to just like that Facebook page. You just type in the Modern Saxophonist, and it's the only Modern Saxophonist page out there. So click on that and sign up. And like it, and every time we release a new episode, you get a ding. I promise we don't do a ton of advertisements or posts on there. We just kind of we post there. And if you'd like to do something for me, is like and share when we have an episode come out. So right now, this is a great episode for you to like and to share. And a lot of people will end up seeing it if you put a little personal thing on there. If something you liked on there, go ahead and put, hey, check out this episode to your fellow buddies, and I tell you, it'll go a long way. And so thank you so much, James Barrera, for coming on and talking with us, and so thank you.
Awesome, Mark. Thanks so much.
And with that, let's get practicing.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. You can find us at www.themodernsaxophonist.com. We're also on Twitter @themodernsax.